I swear, I don't know where he is. Please, I'm pregnant. I don't know anything about his business.
The knife was already at her throat when Naledi realized she'd made a mistake. She'd heard the floorboard creak behind her, just once, barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator, but she'd convinced herself it was nothing. Old buildings made noise. Johannesburg apartments settled at night. There was no reason to panic. Except now there was a blade pressed against her skin, and a voice in her ear saying, "Don't scream." Naledi's hands trembled as she slowly raised them. The glass of water she'd been holding slipped from her fingers and shattered against the kitchen floor. The sound was too loud in the darkness. "Please," she whispered. "My purse is in the bedroom. Take whatever you want." The man behind her laughed softly. "We're not here for your purse." There was more than one. Naledi's heart slammed against her ribs. Her mind raced through options: scream, fight, run, but the knife kept her frozen. She was 16 weeks pregnant. One wrong move and... "Where's Daniel?" the voice asked. The question hit her harder than a blow. This wasn't random. This wasn't a break-in. "I don't know," Naledi said, her voice shaking. "He left 3 days ago. He didn't tell me where." The knife pressed harder. Not enough to cut, but enough to promise it could. "You're lying." "I'm not. I swear I don't know where he is." Tears stung Naledi's eyes. "Please, I'm pregnant. I don't know anything about his business." A second man stepped into view from the living room. He was tall, his face obscured by shadows, his posture relaxed in a way that terrified her more than aggression would have. "She's telling the truth," he said in accented English. "Cole abandoned her. Just like he abandoned his debt." The knife disappeared from Naledi's throat. She gasped, stumbling forward, catching herself against the counter. "What debt?" she asked desperately. "I don't understand what's happening." The tall man studied her for a moment. "Your boyfriend borrowed money from people who don't forgive. When he couldn't pay, he offered something else as insurance." Naledi's stomach dropped. "What did he offer?" The man's expression didn't change. "You." The word hung in the air like smoke. "That's insane," Naledi said, backing away. "Daniel wouldn't, he wouldn't do that." But even as she said it, she remembered. 3 nights ago. Daniel on the phone in the bathroom, voice low and frantic. She'd pressed her ear to the door and heard fragments. "I need more time." "She doesn't know." "An address?" "Why would you?" And then quieter, he'd given it. "Her address. This address." "No," Naledi whispered. "No, he was just scared. He didn't mean." "It doesn't matter what he meant," the tall man interrupted. "What matters is what he said. And now we're here to collect." Naledi's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, glass crunching under her knees, and something inside her shattered along with it. "Please," she begged. "I'll find him. I'll make him pay you back. Just please don't." The tall man crouched in front of her. Up close, she could see his face was neither cruel nor kind. Just professional. "You seem like a reasonable person," he said. "So I'll be honest. Daniel Cole owes 840 million won. He's been avoiding us for 6 months. You're not collateral anymore. You're leverage." "Leverage for what?" Naledi asked, though part of her already knew. "To make sure he remembers what happens when debts go unpaid." The man stood and nodded to his companion. "Get her things. Just the essentials." Naledi tried to stand, but the second man placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Don't fight. It'll be easier." "Where are you taking me?" Her voice cracked. "Somewhere Daniel will eventually have to acknowledge you existed." They allowed her to pack a small bag. Clothes. Identification. The prenatal vitamins from her nightstand. One of the men watched her the entire time, ensuring she didn't reach for her phone or make any sudden movements. As they led her out of the apartment, Naledi took one last look at the life she'd built. The couch where she and Daniel used to watch movies. The small kitchen table where they'd argued about baby names just 2 weeks ago. The bedroom where she'd believed, foolishly, that love was enough to anchor someone. The night air was cold against her skin. They guided her into an unmarked sedan, and as the car pulled away from Parkview Apartments, Naledi understood with terrible clarity that Daniel had already known this was coming. He'd known and he'd run anyway, leaving her behind. The drive lasted hours. Naledi lost track after the second highway transition. She tried to memorize landmarks, turns, anything that might help later, but exhaustion and fear blurred everything together. One of the men offered her water at a rest stop. She took it, hands shaking, and forced herself to drink. "Where are we going?" she asked again. "North," the driver said. It wasn't an answer. They arrived at a house just before dawn. It was isolated, surrounded by empty land and silence. Not a prison, worse. A place where screaming wouldn't matter because no one would hear. Inside, a woman was waiting. She was older, her face worn but not unkind. She spoke to the men in rapid Korean, then turned to Naledi. "Come," she said in Zulu. "You need rest." Naledi followed her to a small bedroom. Clean. Sparse. A lock on the outside of the door. "Why are you helping them?" Naledi asked quietly. The woman's expression flickered with something that might have been shame. "Because I have children too. And they need me to cooperate." She left and the lock clicked into place. Naledi sat on the edge of the bed, placed both hands on her belly, and finally let herself cry. Not loud, wrenching sobs, she didn't have the energy. Just silent tears that wouldn't stop. Daniel had done this. The man she'd trusted. The man she'd loved. The man whose child was growing inside her. He'd spoken her address like she was disposable. And somewhere out there he was probably sleeping soundly, convinced he'd found a way out. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. Naledi had been hurt before. Hearts broke and healed and broke again. The worst part was understanding, with brutal certainty, that she'd never mattered to him at all. 3 weeks passed in that house. The woman, she never gave her name, brought meals, allowed supervised bathroom breaks, and once provided clean clothes when Naledi's own had become unwearable. The men rarely spoke to her directly. They made phone calls in Korean. They came and went on schedules she couldn't decipher. And Naledi waited, trapped in a nightmare with no visible end. Until the night everything changed. She heard it first, shouting outside, sharp and urgent. Then gunfire. 2 shots, precise and terrifying. Then silence. Naledi pressed herself against the far wall, heart hammering. Footsteps approached her door. She grabbed the only thing remotely weapon-like, a lamp, and held it with trembling hands. The door opened. A man stood there. Korean. Mid-40s. Expensive suit, now disheveled. Blood on his knuckles, though she couldn't tell if it was his. Their eyes met. "Naledi Makona?" he asked in perfect English. She nodded, unable to speak. "My name is Seo Joon," he said calmly. "I'm here to negotiate your release." He paused, glancing at the lamp in her hands. "The negotiation is over. We're leaving." Naledi didn't move. "Who are you?" "Someone who just paid a debt those men couldn't cover," Seo Joon replied. "You can come willingly or I can carry you. But we don't have time for a longer conversation. Police will be here in 8 minutes. Something in his tone, the exhaustion, the bluntness, the complete lack of pretense, made Naledi believe him. She dropped the lamp and followed him out. The house was chaos. Overturned furniture. Shattered glass. 2 of the men who'd taken her were on the floor, unconscious or worse. The woman was nowhere to be seen. Seo Joon led Naledi to a car idling outside. The driver didn't speak. They were already moving before she'd fully closed the door. "Where are we going?" Naledi asked, the same question she'd asked 3 weeks ago, though this time with desperate hope instead of terror. "Hospital first," Seo Joon said. "You need to be checked. Then we'll discuss options." "Options for what?" He looked at her directly. "For what happens next." The hospital room was too bright. Too clean. Too safe to feel real. Naledi sat on the examination table while a doctor performed an ultrasound, the cold gel spreading across her belly. She stared at the ceiling, unable to look at the screen. Unable to face the possibility that something might be wrong. "The baby's heartbeat is strong," the doctor said gently. "Everything looks good. You're very lucky." Lucky. The word felt obscene. Seo Joon waited outside. When Naledi emerged, he stood from the plastic chair, his suit jacket draped over his arm, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. "The baby?" he asked. "Fine," Naledi said. Her voice sounded hollow. "We're both fine." He nodded once. "There's a car waiting. We should go somewhere more private to talk." They drove to a hotel, not luxurious but anonymous. Seo Joon had reserved a suite with 2 separate bedrooms. He gestured for Naledi to sit, then opened a bottle of water and handed it to her. "You have questions," he said. It wasn't a question. Naledi laughed bitterly. "I have about 1,000 questions." "Start with one." She studied him. Blood still stained his knuckles. His expensive watch was cracked. Whatever had happened at that house, it hadn't been clean or simple. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why did you come for me?" Seo Joon was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. 8 years ago, my wife took our daughter to Canada after our divorce. I haven't seen my daughter since. She was 14 then. She'll be 22 now. He met Naledi's eyes. When I learned about you, pregnant, being held as leverage for someone else's debt, I thought about what I would want someone to do for her if she were in trouble. You don't even know me, Naledi whispered. No, he agreed. But I know what it's like to have someone disappear from your life because of choices you made. He paused. The men holding you were part of a loan syndicate I've had dealings with. Bad dealings. When I discovered they had you, I leveraged information they needed buried to secure your release. You blackmailed them. Essentially, yes. Naledi processed this. And Daniel? Seo Joon's expression hardened slightly. Daniel Cole gave them your address to buy himself time. He knew exactly what he was doing. The confirmation hurt worse than she'd expected. Some part of her had still hoped for a misunderstanding. Some innocent explanation. I want to go home, she said quietly. That's not safe, Seo Joon replied. Those men know where you live. And Daniel knows where you live. Until I can guarantee neither poses a threat, going back is dangerous. Then what am I supposed to do? Naledi's voice rose. Just hide forever? No. You disappear properly. New documentation. New identity. New city. Seo Joon leaned forward. I can arrange all of it. It takes time and money, but it's possible. I don't have money. I do. He held up a hand before she could protest. Consider it an investment. Someday, if necessary, your testimony about what happened might be valuable. But more than that, he hesitated. I'm not often in a position to do something unambiguously good. Let me do this. Naledi wanted to argue. Wanted to refuse on principle. But she was exhausted and terrified and pregnant, and he was offering her a way out. Okay, she whispered. Over the following months, Naledi disappeared. Seo Joon's lawyers were efficient and discreet. She received new identification under a carefully constructed identity. They relocated her to Cape Town, far from Johannesburg's familiar dangers. Money appeared in an account she could access but not trace. And slowly, impossibly, she began to rebuild. The baby, a girl, was born on a clear winter morning. Naledi held her daughter for the first time and felt something crack open inside her chest. Not breaking. Opening. Thandi, she whispered. Your name is Thandi. Beloved. Seo Joon visited 3 times during her recovery. Each time he brought impractical gifts. Designer baby clothes Thandi would outgrow in weeks, expensive toys she was too young to appreciate. Each time he stayed less than an hour, maintaining careful distance. On his 3rd visit, Naledi finally asked, Why do you keep leaving so quickly? Because you've been through enough without feeling obligated to entertain your rescuer, he said. You're not just my rescuer anymore, Naledi replied quietly. I don't know what you are, but you're not a stranger. Something shifted in Seo Joon's expression, softened. Then as someone who's no longer a stranger, he said carefully, I need to tell you something. Daniel Cole has done well for himself since you disappeared. Naledi's chest tightened. I don't want to know. Yes, you do. Otherwise, you'll spend years wondering. Seo Joon pulled out his phone and showed her. Social media photos. Daniel in a new suit. Daniel at business events. Daniel with his arm around a new woman, both of them smiling. He'd moved on completely. Naledi stared at the images until they blurred. He just forgot I existed. He worked very hard to forget, Seo Joon corrected. There's a difference. What difference does it make? Her voice cracked. Seo Joon put his phone away. It means his peace is built on willful erasure. That kind of foundation is unstable. Naledi looked at Thandi, sleeping peacefully in her bassinet. What am I supposed to do with this information? Whatever you need to, Seo Joon said. When you're ready. 2 years passed. Thandi learned to walk, then run, then ask endless questions about everything. Naledi found work as a consultant, carefully rebuilding a professional life under her new identity. She started therapy. Stopped having nightmares every night. Learned that healing wasn't linear but was possible. And every few months, Seo Joon visited. Sometimes for business in Cape Town. Sometimes Naledi suspected just to check on them. The visits became familiar, comfortable, something that felt dangerously close to friendship. Until one evening, watching Thandi play with blocks on the floor, Naledi finally said it. I want him to know what he did. Seo Joon looked up from his coffee. Daniel? Yes. Naledi's voice was steady. I don't want revenge. I don't want him hurt. But I want him to understand what it cost me. What it still costs me. I want him to carry it the way I've had to carry it. Seo Joon considered this carefully. That's more complicated than revenge. Can you do it? Not alone, he said. This would be our project. You'd need to be involved. You'd have to face him eventually when he's most vulnerable. Could you do that? Naledi thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, terrified, powerless, erased. Then she looked at the woman she'd become, scarred but stronger, broken but rebuilt. Yes, she said. I could do that. Seo Joon nodded slowly. Then we'll need to be patient and strategic. This can't look like revenge. It has to look like consequences finally catching up. How long will it take? However long it takes to do it right. He met her eyes. Are you sure? Once we start, there's no going back. Naledi picked up Thandi, who squirmed happily in her arms. She thought about what she'd tell her daughter someday about justice, about accountability, about the cost of looking away from harm. I'm sure, she said. The plan took shape slowly, meticulously. Seo Joon used his business connections to monitor Daniel's career. They learned he'd moved to Pretoria, taken a position with a mid-sized investment firm, and continued his pattern of calculated ambition. He was successful, respected, untouchable. We need to create an opportunity he can't refuse, Seo Joon explained one evening, spreading documents across Naledi's dining table. Something big enough that he'll ignore any warning signs. What kind of opportunity? International expansion. A partnership with a Korean firm that could make his career. Seo Joon looked at her. My firm. Naledi understood. You'd lure him to Seoul. Yes, on our territory, where we control every variable. He paused. But the timing has to be perfect. He needs to be confident, comfortable, convinced he's finally escaped his past. How long? Naledi asked. Another year. Maybe 2. Seo Joon's expression was serious. I know that's a long time to wait. Naledi thought about the 3 weeks she'd spent locked in that house. The months of rebuilding. The years of living under a false identity. I've already waited 3 years, she said. I can wait longer if it means doing this right. If you're already hooked by Naledi's journey from victim to survivor, just wait until you see what happens when she finally confronts the man who erased her. Hit that subscribe button because this story is about to get even more intense. Daniel Cole had learned to sleep peacefully again. It had taken time, months of deliberately not thinking about Johannesburg, about the apartment in Braamfontein, about the missing person report he'd filed 3 weeks too late with the wrong address. But eventually the guilt had faded into background noise. A dull ache he trained himself to ignore. Life in Pretoria was good. His new position paid well. His girlfriend Michelle was uncomplicated in all the ways Naledi had been complicated. She didn't ask about his past. Didn't probe his silences. Didn't make him feel like he owed her explanations. When the email arrived, Daniel almost deleted it. Subject: exclusive partnership opportunity, Seoul. Another unsolicited pitch. His inbox was full of them. But something made him pause. The sender's domain was legitimate, a major Korean private equity firm. He opened it. Mr. Cole, your work in emerging markets has caught our attention. We're seeking a strategic partner for a South Korea-South Africa investment initiative. This opportunity could be transformative for the right candidate. Final approval requires an in-person presentation in Seoul. All expenses covered. Are you interested? Daniel read it 3 times. This was the kind of break careers were built on. The kind of opportunity that came once, maybe twice in a lifetime. He responded within an hour. Michelle was less enthusiastic when he told her over dinner. Seoul, she said, fork pausing halfway to her mouth. For how long? A week. Maybe 2 at most. Daniel reached across the table, taking her hand. This is huge, Michigan. This could change everything for us. It feels sudden, she said quietly. The best opportunities usually do. She didn't argue further, but something in her expression made Daniel uncomfortable. Like she could see the parts of himself he kept carefully hidden. He left for Seoul 3 weeks later. The flight was interminable. Daniel drank too much wine, slept poorly, and arrived at Incheon International Airport exhausted and wired with nervous energy. A driver was waiting with his name on a placard. Professional. Silent. Efficient. The car was black, expensive, unmarked. As they pulled away from the airport, Daniel checked his phone. Messages from Michelle. From his assistant. From his boss wishing him luck. Everything felt normal. Right. He didn't notice when they turned away from Seoul's business district. Didn't notice the route taking them to quieter streets, older buildings. By the time he realized they'd been driving for 40 minutes, They were already pulling up to an unmarked building. "This isn't the business district," Daniel said, trying to keep his tone light. "Mr. Seo prefers privacy for preliminary meetings," the driver replied. Inside, the building was expensively anonymous. Marble floors. Subtle art. A receptionist who smiled without warmth and gestured toward an elevator. Daniel's unease grew with each floor. The conference room was sleek and minimal. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul. A long table with several chairs, most of them empty. Seo Joon was already there. "Mr. Cole." He stood, extending his hand. "Thank you for traveling so far." Daniel shook his hand, noting the firm grip, the direct eye contact, the quality of the suit. Everything about Seo Joon radiated controlled power. "Thank you for the opportunity," Daniel said, settling into a chair. "I've been looking forward to discussing the partnership." They talked business for 20 minutes. The proposal was solid. Impressive even. Daniel started to relax. This was real. This was happening. Then Seo Joon's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His expression didn't change, but something in the room shifted. A subtle cooling. "Before we proceed to specifics," Seo Joon said carefully, "I need to understand something about your background." Daniel tensed slightly. "My CV is quite comprehensive. I'm less interested in your CV than your character." Seo Joon slid a folder across the table. "We take due diligence very seriously." Daniel opened it and his world tilted. Bank statements from 6 years ago. Loan documents. Names he'd worked desperately to forget. Addresses. Dates. Transaction records showing desperate attempts to juggle debts he couldn't pay. "This is confidential financial information," Daniel said, his voice tight. "How did you get this?" "Due diligence," Seo Joon repeated calmly. "As I said." Daniel's heart hammered. "Those debts were settled years ago. This is ancient history." "History is never as ancient as we'd like it to be." Seo Joon's tone remained pleasant, but his eyes were steel. "Especially when it involves choices that hurt innocent people." "I don't know what you're implying." The door opened. Daniel turned. Naledi walked in. For a moment, Daniel forgot how to breathe. His brain couldn't process what his eyes were seeing. This couldn't be real. Naledi was gone. Missing. Possibly dead. He'd convinced himself she was dead because that was easier than the alternatives. But she was standing right there. She looked different. Stronger. Her posture was straight, her gaze steady. She wore a professional dress, her hair styled in a way he'd never seen. But her eyes, those were the same eyes that had looked at him with trust 3 years ago. "Naledi?" The word came out broken. She sat down beside Seo Joon without responding. Daniel stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "This is insane. What is this?" "Sit down, Mr. Cole," Seo Joon said quietly. Something in his tone made Daniel obey before he'd consciously decided to. "Naledi, I thought." Daniel's voice shook. "I looked for you. I filed a report. I tried to find you." "You filed a report 3 weeks after I disappeared," Naledi said calmly. "With the wrong address listed. Your old apartment, not mine." Daniel's mouth opened. "Close. You want to explain that?" she asked. "I was confused. Stressed. He looked desperately between them. "I don't understand what's happening. You're alive. You're here. Isn't that good news?" Seo Joon pulled out a laptop and turned it toward Daniel. Security footage began playing. Daniel leaving his apartment the night Naledi was taken. Returning 3 days later with new luggage. The missing person report, filed casually, details clearly wrong. "Stop," Daniel whispered. "Please stop." The footage continued. Audio now. Daniel on the phone. "I need more time. She doesn't know anything." "An address? Why would you need?" A long pause. "Bramfontein. Parkview Apartments. Unit 7B. Daniel's face drained of color. "I didn't know what they'd do. I swear I didn't know." "You knew enough," Naledi said softly. Seo Joon closed the laptop. "Mr. Cole, you're not here for a business deal." Daniel looked at him, then at Naledi, understanding finally crashing down like a building collapsing floor by floor. "This is revenge," he said hoarsely. "No," Naledi replied. "This is the conversation we never got to have." Daniel's hands trembled. "What do you want?" "Money? I'll pay you. Whatever it takes." "We don't want your money," Seo Joon said. "Then what?" Daniel's voice cracked. "What do you want from me?" Naledi leaned forward slightly. "I want you to understand something. When you gave them my address, you didn't just betray me. You erased me. I had to die to survive. Do you understand that?" Naledi Makona doesn't exist anymore. That woman is gone because you traded her life for a few more weeks of yours. I was desperate. Daniel's composure shattered completely. They were going to kill me. And so you chose me instead, Naledi said, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. You chose to let them take me. Take our baby. Daniel's breath caught. The baby is fine. No thanks to you. Naledi stood. I didn't come here to watch you grovel. I came here to show you something. She pulled out her phone and showed him a photo. A little girl with bright eyes and a brilliant smile, playing in a park. Her name is Thandi, Naledi said. She's 3 years old. She asks questions about everything. Last week she asked me why some people hurt others. Daniel stared at the photo, something breaking behind his eyes. I told her, Naledi continued, that people hurt others when they're more afraid of their own pain than anyone else's. She said, that's sad, Mama. She's 3 and she understands something you still don't. Naledi put her phone away. This meeting is over. But this isn't. She walked toward the door. Naledi, wait. Daniel stood desperately. Please? I'm sorry. I've regretted it every single day. She paused at the door, not turning around. That's a lie. You've worked very hard not to regret it. You moved cities. Changed jobs. Found someone new. You built a whole life on top of pretending I never existed. What do you want me to do? Daniel shouted, panic shredding his voice. Tell me. I'll do anything. Naledi finally looked back at him. Live with it. The way I've had to live with it. That's all. She left. Seo Joon stood slowly. You should return to your hotel, Mr. Cole. Rest. You have meetings tomorrow. Daniel stared at him in disbelief. Meetings? You think I can just... Yes, Seo Joon interrupted. Because if you don't, people will ask questions. And the answers to those questions will be very uncomfortable for you. He walked Daniel to the elevator. As the doors began to close, Daniel called out desperately. How long? How long does this go on? Seo Joon's expression was unreadable. Ask Naledi. She carried it for 3 years. You've carried it for 3 minutes. The doors closed. Daniel's hotel room felt like a cage. He paced for hours, his mind spinning in useless circles. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Naledi's face. The steadiness in her voice. The photograph of the daughter he'd never known existed. His daughter. The realization hit him again and again like waves trying to drown him. He tried to call Michelle twice. Both times, he'd hung up before she answered. What could he possibly say? At 2 a.m., exhaustion finally pulled him under. He dreamed of locked doors and voices calling his name, and woke at dawn drenched in sweat. His phone was full of messages. Work emails. Calendar reminders about today's meetings. Everything proceeding as if his world hadn't detonated yesterday. Daniel showered, dressed in his best suit, and went downstairs like a man walking to his own execution. The driver was waiting. Same car. Same silence. They drove to a legitimate office building this time, glass and steel, a corporate logo he recognized. Inside, the meeting room was full of actual investors, actual executives, actual presentations about market opportunities and financial projections. Daniel spoke when required. Smiled when appropriate. Shook hands with people whose faces he'd forget immediately. He was an actor playing himself, and everyone seemed to believe the performance. Except for the woman in the back row. Naledi sat there the entire meeting saying nothing, just watching. Her presence was a weight he felt in his chest. When the meeting ended and people filed out congratulating him on a strong presentation, Daniel approached her. Why are you here? He asked quietly. To see if you'd run, she replied. Run where? You've made it clear I have nowhere to go. Naledi studied him. You're angry. I'm terrified, Daniel corrected. There's a difference. Yes, she agreed. There is. She stood to leave, but Daniel grabbed her arm. Gently but desperately. Please. Just tell me what happens now. What comes next? Naledi looked at his hand on her arm until he released it. What happens now, she said carefully, is you live your life. You go to your meetings. You call your girlfriend. You pretend everything is normal. How is that possible? Daniel's voice cracked. The same way I pretended everything was normal while locked in a room wondering if I'd ever see daylight again. Her voice remained steady, but something flickered in her eyes. You'll figure it out. She left him standing there. Over the next week, Daniel's life became surreal. The business meetings continued. The deal progressed. He had dinners with potential partners, toured facilities, gave presentations. Everything moved forward exactly as it should. But underneath he was unraveling. His hotel phone rang at odd hours, 3 a.m., 4:30 a.m., and when he answered, there was only silence before the line disconnected. His email received anonymous messages with subject lines that made his blood run cold. Remember Bramfantine? Or how well do you sleep? The messages contained nothing when opened. Just blank screens. He started seeing Naledi everywhere. In crowds. Across restaurants. Standing in hotel lobbies. Every time when he looked again she was gone. You look terrible, one of the Korean executives said over lunch. Are you sleeping? Jet lag, Daniel lied. Still adjusting. Back in Pretoria things were deteriorating too. Michelle called less frequently. When she did call, her questions were pointed. I did some research on your company's Korean partners, she said one evening. There are rumors. Nothing concrete, but questions about their due diligence practices. Rumors aren't facts, Daniel said too quickly. No, Michelle agreed. But I also found something else. A missing person case from Johannesburg. 3 years ago. A woman named Naledi Makona. The address on the police report, that was your old building. Daniel's heart stopped. That was a coincidence. I filed the report because we dated and... You filed it 3 weeks late, Daniel? With the wrong apartment number. Silence stretched between them. Who was she to you? Michelle asked quietly. Someone I couldn't help, Daniel whispered. Someone I failed. Another long pause. I need some time to think, Michelle said and hung up. Daniel stood holding his dead phone, understanding that Seo Joon and Naledi weren't just dismantling his past. They were dismantling his present, piece by careful piece. On his 8th night in Seoul, Daniel received a dinner invitation. Seo Joon's assistant called personally. Mr. Seo would like to discuss the final contract details. Tonight, if you're available. Daniel wanted to refuse. Wanted to pack his bags and flee back to South Africa. But he understood now that running wouldn't help. Whatever trap they built was already sprung. The restaurant was private, exclusive. Seo Joon sat alone at a corner table, 2 glasses of wine already poured. Sit, he said. Not an invitation. An instruction. Daniel sat. You're struggling, Seo Joon observed. What gave it away? Daniel's laugh was bitter. The shadows under your eyes. The way you keep looking over your shoulder. The 3 calls you made to your lawyer that he hasn't returned yet. Seo Joon sipped his wine. You're wondering when the other shoe drops. Isn't it already dropping? Daniel gestured vaguely. The phone calls. The emails. Michelle asking questions. This is psychological torture. No, Seo Joon corrected calmly. This is consequence. Torture would be faster. Daniel's hands clenched. What do you want from me? A confession? Public apology? You want me to destroy my own career? Just tell me and let's get this over with. It's not that simple. Seo Joon leaned back. You see, Naledi doesn't want your destruction. She's been quite clear about that. Then what does she want? For you to carry it. Seo Joon's eyes were hard. The weight. The knowing. The memory of what you did. She wants it to follow you the way fear followed her. For how long? Daniel demanded. As long as it takes. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Seo Joon finished his wine. But I'll give you something concrete. Your company is about to receive audit requests. Multiple jurisdictions. Nothing criminal, but enough to require extensive documentation. Daniel's blood ran cold. You're sabotaging my business. I'm revealing inconsistencies that already existed. You cut corners, Daniel. Made questionable deals. Hid liabilities in subsidiary structures. You were always one audit away from serious problems. I'm simply making sure that audit happens. Why? Daniel's voice broke. If Naledi doesn't want me destroyed, why are you doing this? Seo Joon's expression shifted. For the first time, something almost like anger showed through. Because 3 years ago I found a pregnant woman locked in a room, terrified and alone, because you chose your comfort over her life. Because I have a daughter I haven't seen in years, and I know what it means to fail someone. Because men like you, he stopped, collected himself. Men like you need to understand that actions have weight. I understand. Daniel shouted. Several other diners glanced over. He lowered his voice. I understand. I live with it every day. You live with discomfort, Seo Joon corrected. Not consequence. There's a difference. He stood, placed money on the table and walked out. Daniel sat there for another hour, staring at his untouched wine, feeling the walls close in. When he finally returned to his hotel, there was an envelope slipped under his door. Inside, a single photograph, Naledi and Thandi at a playground. The little girl on a swing mid-laugh while Naledi pushed her. Both of them looking happy. Free. On the back, in handwriting he didn't recognize, "This is what survival looks like." Daniel sank onto the bed, still clutching the photograph. For the first time in 3 years, he let himself truly think about what he'd done. Not the edited version he'd told himself to sleep at night. The real version. The full version. He'd heard Naledi's voice on the phone that night, asking him where he'd been. He'd seen her growing belly and felt the suffocating pressure of responsibility he didn't want. When the loan sharks demanded collateral, when they asked for an address, he'd calculated the odds in seconds. Her or him. And he'd chosen himself. Not in a moment of panic. Not without thinking. He'd waited. Decided she was the acceptable loss. The sob that came out of him was ugly and raw. Daniel cried for the first time since childhood. Not gentle tears, but heaving, gasping breakdowns that left him shaking. When his phone rang an hour later, he answered without checking who it was. "Hello." His voice was wrecked. "It's Naledi." Daniel sat up straight. "Naledi, don't talk. Just listen." Her voice was quiet but firm. "Tomorrow you'll go home. The business deal is dead. Seo Joon will cite concerns about compatibility. You'll return to Pretoria and your life will continue." "What does that mean?" Daniel whispered. "It means you'll wake up every day knowing what you did. You'll build relationships wondering if they'd stay if they knew. You'll achieve success knowing it's built on someone else's suffering. That's your consequence." "And you?" Daniel asked. "Do you get peace?" A long pause. "I already have it. Because I didn't trade someone's life for mine." The line went dead. Daniel sat in the darkness, understanding finally settling over him like a shroud. This wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And truth, he was learning, was heavier than any sentence. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, wait until you see how everything unravels in the final chapter. Drop a comment below telling us what you think Daniel deserves, and don't forget to like this video, because justice is about to be served in the most unexpected way. Daniel returned to Pretoria a different man. Not better. Not redeemed. Just different. Hollowed out in places he didn't know could be empty. The business deal collapsed exactly as Naledi had predicted. Seo Joon's firm issued a polite statement citing strategic misalignment. Daniel's company accepted it with disappointment but no suspicion. These things happened in international business. But the audits came next. Not dramatic raids or criminal investigations. Just careful, methodical requests for documentation. Banks wanted clarification on old transactions. Tax authorities had questions about subsidiary structures. Regulators noticed patterns that had previously escaped attention. Nothing was illegal, but everything was uncomfortable. Daniel spent months buried in paperwork, explaining decisions he'd made years ago, justifying shortcuts that had seemed harmless at the time. His company's lawyers grew frustrated. His boss grew cold. "We're concerned about your judgment," his boss said during a tense meeting. "These irregularities suggest a pattern of carelessness." "They're not irregularities," Daniel protested. "They're just poorly documented." Which is the same thing. 3 months after Seoul, Daniel was placed on administrative leave. Not fired. Just removed. Set aside while the company assessed the situation. Michelle left him 2 weeks later. She did it kindly, which somehow made it worse. "I can't be with someone who has this much buried," she said, packing her things. "Every time I look at you, I wonder what else you're not telling me." "I've told you everything," Daniel lied. Michelle paused at the door. "That's the saddest part. I don't think you even know what everything is anymore." After she left, Daniel sat in his empty apartment and understood what Naledi had meant. This was survival. Waking up. Going through motions. Existing without actually living. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Yes." His voice was flat. "It's Seo Joon." Daniel closed his eyes. "What now?" "I'm calling to tell you it's over." Daniel's breath caught. "Over?" "The audits will conclude. You'll be cleared of any criminal wrongdoing. Your company will likely allow you to return, though in a diminished capacity. Your life will continue." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Naledi asked me to." Seo Joon paused. "She wanted you to know that this was never about destroying you. It was about making you visible. To yourself most of all." Daniel's throat tightened. Can I speak to her?" "She's considered it." Another pause. She's willing to meet. What? Finally. If you're willing to hear what she actually needs to say. When? Daniel whispered. Tomorrow. I'll send you an address. The line went dead. The address led Daniel to a small cafe in Johannesburg. Neutral territory. Public. Safe. Naledi was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. She looked tired but calm, settled in a way he'd never seen. Daniel sat down across from her, and for a long moment neither spoke. Thank you for coming, Naledi finally said. I didn't think I had a choice. You always have a choice. That's the point. She met his eyes. I wanted to see you one last time. To see if you understood yet. Understood what? Daniel's voice was rough. What you took from me. Naledi's voice remained steady. Not just my safety. Not just those 3 weeks. You took my ability to trust my own judgment. For years I questioned everything, how I'd missed the signs, why I'd loved someone capable of that, whether I'd somehow deserved it. You didn't deserve it, Daniel said quickly. None of it was your fault. I know that now, Naledi replied. But it took years of therapy and rebuilding to believe it. Years of Seo Joon's patient friendship showing me what actual integrity looks like. Years of raising Thandi and learning to trust the world again. Daniel's hands trembled on the table. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I'm sorry. I believe you, Naledi said. And that's why I'm here. To tell you that I don't forgive you. The words landed like stones. But, she continued, I also don't carry you anymore. You're not the center of my story. You're just the thing that happened before I became who I am now. Daniel felt tears sting his eyes. What am I supposed to do with that? Whatever you need to. Naledi stood, gathering her bag. I have to pick up Thandi from preschool. She's learning to read. It's beautiful watching her discover words. Does she? Daniel's voice cracked. Does she know about me? Naledi considered the question carefully. She knows she has a biological father who made choices that hurt people. When she's older, if she asks to know more, I'll tell her the truth. But I won't let your mistakes become her burden. She turned to leave, then paused. Seo Joon wanted to destroy you, she said quietly. He had the means and the justification. But I stopped him. Do you know why? Daniel shook his head, unable to speak. Because I didn't want to become someone who erased people to feel powerful. That's what you did to me. And I refused to let you turn me into that. She looked at him one final time. Live your life, Daniel. Just try to live it better than you have been. She walked out. Daniel sat there for an hour after she left, watching people come and go, living ordinary lives full of ordinary problems. Eventually he paid for Naledi's untouched tea and his own coffee he'd never ordered. Outside, Johannesburg hummed with afternoon traffic. Somewhere in this city, Naledi was picking up her daughter from school. Somewhere, Seo Joon was managing his business empire. Somewhere, Michelle was moving on with someone who didn't carry ghosts. And Daniel was standing on a street corner, finally understanding what consequence actually meant. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't suffering. It was responsibility. The weight of knowing what you'd done and choosing, every single day, to do better. Daniel pulled out his phone and did something he should have done 3 years ago. He called the detective who'd handled Naledi's missing person case. I need to give an updated statement, he said. About what actually happened. The full truth. The detective was silent for a moment. Mr. Cole, are you sure? This could have legal implications. I'm sure, Daniel said. And for the first time in years he meant something completely. 3 months later, Daniel stood in a courtroom. Not as a defendant. The statute of limitations had passed, and prosecutors deemed his cooperation more valuable than charges. But as a witness, testifying against the loan syndicate that had taken Naledi, providing details that helped dismantle their operations across 3 countries. It didn't absolve him. Nothing could do that. But it was something. A step toward the man he should have been. In the gallery he saw Seo Joon. Just for a moment. The older man nodded once. Not forgiveness, just acknowledgement, and left before the session ended. Naledi wasn't there. She didn't need to be. Years passed. Daniel rebuilt quietly. Smaller job. Smaller apartment. Smaller ambitions. He volunteered at a crisis center on weekends. He went to therapy. He learned to sit with his own guilt instead of running from it. And every year, on the anniversary of the night he'd given that address, he donated to women's shelters under Naledi's real name, the one she no longer used. It wasn't redemption, but it was remembering. Because Naledi had taught him something crucial. Some debts could never be repaid. Some harm couldn't be undone. but you could choose to carry that knowledge honorably instead of burying it. Meanwhile, across the country, Naledi Makona, who now went by a different name, sat on her porch watching Thandi chase fireflies in the garden. Seo Joon sat beside her, his presence as steady as it had been for 6 years now. "Do you ever wonder what happened to him?" Seo Joon asked. Naledi watched her daughter's joy, pure and uncomplicated. "Sometimes, but not the way I used to. Now when I think of Daniel, I mostly feel nothing. And that's how I know I'm free." Seo Joon smiled. "That's the best revenge. Not caring anymore." "It's not revenge," Naledi corrected gently. "It's just peace." Thandi ran up to them, breathless and laughing. "Mama, did you see? I almost caught one." Naledi pulled her daughter close. "I saw, my love. You were magnificent." And in that moment, surrounded by people who had chosen her, who had protected her, who had helped her rebuild, Naledi understood something profound. Daniel had tried to erase her, but she had survived anyway, transformed anyway, thrived anyway. That was the real ending to her story. Not his destruction, but her freedom. If this story kept you hooked from that terrifying first moment to this powerful ending, then you need to subscribe to Addicted to Stories right now. We bring you the most intense, emotionally gripping tales that will stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that like button if Naledi's journey touched you, and drop a comment telling us, do you think Daniel got what he deserved, or should consequences have been harsher? More stories like this are coming, and trust us, you don't want to miss what we have next. Subscribe now, because once you're addicted to our stories, there's no going back.